So today I'm going to talk to you about the aftermath of the 2019 bushfires and how we responded to the communications challenges as a local government. So can I have the first slide, please? That's my title slide. So obviously we're a local council, and I'll be looking at it from our point of view. So first of all, the Clarence Valley, if you don't know where it is, we're up in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. We're slightly below Byron and just above Coffs Harbour, about 250 kilometres south of Brisbane and 600 kilometres north of Sydney. So that should give you an idea of where we are. So our region, we're in the Northern Rivers. Next slide, please. We're in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales, and the Clarence River runs through our council area, which is obviously where we get the name Clarence Valley Council. So our location next to one of the Eastern Australia's largest river catchments usually means we get a lot of flooding, and we're kind of used to dealing with floods. And in 2019, that all changed, obviously, because we had the bushfires. Our residents know how to deal with floods. Floods give us 4 or 5 days notice. We know which areas are going to flood. We've got a history of where the floods happen. So it's sort of par for the course with flooding. Bushfires presented us with a completely different set of issues, which I hope we managed to complete and satisfy. So as you saw some previous footage earlier from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, the 2019 bushfire season was unprecedented. And I've got a short video which will be on the next slide, which will give you an idea of what it was like for us.
Let's go to Amber Laidler, who's monitoring the bushfire emergency in northern New South Wales. Amber, you're in Yamba tonight.
Yes, Michael, and the main concern for crews tonight is this southerly change that's forecast to pass over. They're worried that it will push the fire front closer towards the townships and even maybe as far north as Yamba. It was around 6 o'clock tonight that we saw this blaze downgraded to a watch and act alert level, but still throughout the night we are seeing convoys of residents evacuating their homes. This is them coming down now. They're being escorted by police. Throughout the afternoon, a number of fire crews, both on the ground and in the air, have been working on this fire front, trying to push it further away from homes. This is one of 3 fires across New South Wales that remain of concern to fire authorities tonight. One is at Bees Nest near Armidale, the other, the Long Gully Road fire at Drake. That one has already burnt through more than 32,000 hectares of land. We know a number of properties have been lost in that fire, but fire crews have managed to save more than 200 homes, which really is a credit to the fantastic work of the crews and the volunteers on the fire grounds. They are expecting another night and another morning of strong winds across the state's north, so another long and challenging evening ahead for fire crews here, Michael.
Indeed. All right, Amber Laidler, thank you.
So for us, the bushfire season started in July, and it just got worse and worse and worse. As the fires finished wiping out one area, and they were relatively contained, a different location would flare up, and we would go through the whole crisis again. Next slide, please. So I've got a map here of the north, to the east coast of the northern section of New South Wales, and you can see the devastation that the bushfires brought in 2019. The Clarence Valley is that large local government area of the northern part of the screen. And so from our point of view, it wiped out 5,429 square kilometres, which is over 500,000 hectares. So it was a really, really enormous fire for us, and you've got some comparisons in terms of the areas that it covered. The Sydney one is probably more relevant to more people. It was a huge area that burned, and it was about 6 months of the community feeling the impact of the devastation of the bushfire. Our throats were hoarse from breathing in the smoke for weeks. In addition to the fires around Yamba you saw in the news clip, they also devastated the hinterland around the city of Grafton, and also to the north and west of Iluka and Maclean. So it covered our whole council area at different times. This was a huge challenge for our community, and a challenge for us as a local government, as you can expect. So next slide, please. So this is just a damage snapshot. I think these numbers speak for themselves. It just gives you a breakdown of what was destroyed. And from our point of view, as well as the impacts on buildings and facilities, as a local government, we had massive challenges with waste, road infrastructure, and bridges being destroyed, which many of the bridges in our LGA are made of wood, and they just burnt out, so it cut communications. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you this slide, just it might just seem a bit funny in a presentation on bushfire communication from a local government. As someone who became an Australian back in 2013, I had to undertake a citizenship test, and I learned what each of these levels of government were responsible for. I don't think that's generally the case for Australian-born citizens, and that was really brought home to me in this disaster. In a disaster, the community, by and large, views all three levels of government as the same. Lines of responsibilities blur. And the backdrop of bushfire recovery is a complex interplay between all of these governments, and then you have to add in the community sector organisations and the affected communities. From our point of view, it was really important that communications to our community was clear. Although we had a fairly clear understanding as to how we were going to communicate with our community, our understanding of the actual recovery developed as we were immersed in the process. And from a local government point of view, we worked incredibly closely with the New South Wales Office of Emergency Management. The New South Wales government were fantastic throughout the bushfire season. And I'd like to pay tribute to Jeremy Hillman and his team, who provided support and resources that we simply didn't have as a local government. As the fires moved south, and it was a long bushfire season, the state agencies were becoming increasingly stretched, and it was then important for us to step up and take more responsibility, which is I think what we did. So next slide, please. So say hello to the Clarence Valley Council Communications team. And I have a small confession to make. Clarence Valley Council created a new communications team at the end of August 2019, about 2 weeks before the bushfires started. We actually didn't have a bushfire communication strategy either during the disaster or in recovery. So we went back to basics. Luckily, we were quite a large team, and working as a team was really critical for us. As the fires went over a long period, we were able to support each other and spread the load and the stress, which worked really well. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We developed a plan very quickly. So a high-level communications plan was developed alongside community-based communication strategies, which focused on face-to-face engagement, community meetings, and assistance provided at the discovery recovery point at our customer service centre in Grafton. Our aim was to support communities. Our immediate response was as simple as asking communities how we could help them and commencing a close and honest dialogue. It was also essential that we did not disregard existing structures, plans, and people who had good knowledge of their communities. It was important that council leaders were present on the ground in the communities from the outset. And so we have a community development team, and they focused on that sort of on the ground, face-to-face disaster recovery engagement with the community. And then our communications focused on the high-level communications, which obviously worked hand in glove on many issues. So next slide, please. We had some really simple messaging mantras, and I think these are well known. So we focused on what we knew, what we didn't know, what we are doing, and what we wanted the community to do. So when the sort of fires reached their zenith in our council area, we're fortunate enough to have the state government supporters, as I said, and we had a visit from Peter Eckers, who calmed the nerves and reassured us that we were on the right path. We use these really simple messaging mantras in most of our communications, and we found it worked really well. As you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, there's an example of our some of our social media, which was just as the fires gone through an area around Grafton, and it wiped out a lot of roads, a lot of bridges were destroyed. So you can see we really broke down the communications to people. We had a lot to say, and with social media, people skim and they don't take it in. But obviously we found with these the messages around bushfires, people were really receptive to them. but we wanted to make sure people took them in. So we broke long messages down into bullet points, into really simple instructions and information pieces. And we used emojis as well. Emojis worked really well in all the sort of long social media posts that we had to do. We just found that they helped as visual cues, and that's why we used them. Next slide, please. So from the outset, we created a disaster recovery working together brand. You can see this was used, it was used alongside our council brand. It was used across our social media and print media. So traditional media is still really important in our region. So after the fires devastated the Grafton hinterland, we took a full-page newspaper ad in the local newspaper, the Grafton Daily Examiner. You can see the ad in the slide here. We also had an ongoing bushfire messaging every week in the Daily Examiner over a period of many months. And in fact, we still do. So we're still pumping out those messages, even though we're months after the actual bushfire event. And we also positioned our council leaders, so the general manager and the mayor, as recovery leaders in our community. This was nicely juxtaposed with what Scott Scoma was doing holidaying in Hawaii at the time, so it worked out really well. So you can see the ad in the newspaper ad in the slide, which was a full-page ad in the Daily Examiner, and you can see the different messaging that we included. And we ensured that so the community understood who their leaders were, that we were a source of truth and that we could be trusted. We knew what we were doing. We were telling the information how we knew it, and being very honest with people. If we didn't know something, we were telling them that. We were also telling them how we were working with other state government, the state government. People thought it was our responsibility to open up evacuation centres. So it was important for us to say, we're trying to fix the roads. The state's looking after the evacuation centres. So we were trying to educate people at the same time. So next slide, please. Apologies if there's anyone called Karen watching. This is a meme that's been around for about 12 months. I've seen it probably in the last 12 months. And I thought it went well with this the topic of social media moderation. So you've heard that everyone on social media is an expert. Social media is the great leveler. It enables anyone to broadcast whatever they like. And there's obviously some really good advantages with that, but there's some disadvantages as well. And on social media, especially Facebook, it was really important to manage and moderate responses from the community. So you can see in the meme, back in the 1980s, leading scientists were the expert, and then it was the PhD student in the 1990s. And then in the 2000s, it was the media expert. And then in the 2010s, it's Karen on Facebook. And I suppose that's just some symbolic of anyone being able to comment and anyone's opinion being valid, and just a PhD student could make a comment, and no one with any qualifications could make a comment, and their opinion would be exactly the same on Facebook, and that's what Facebook does. So comments, many of the community pages that were set up in response to this disaster shared our content that we created, and the admins of these pages were getting really stressed managing the pages, and it became a burden of their time. And we advised their moderators to these community pages that it was really important to effectively moderate them. And you can see on the social media post on the right-hand side, we're trying to present, we're trying to reassure the community that the council leaders are going out to where the disaster happened, taking charge, everything's under control. We're in this together, we're going to work with you. And then we have a post at the bottom there from someone who wants to talk about backburning, which is an issue to do with bushfires, but it certainly is not an issue that we wanted on this post. And therefore we hid the post, because we didn't want a narrative to take place under the post that would distract people from what the message that we were trying to get across. And I suppose if you are managing social media during recovery and disaster, don't be afraid to moderate. I think it's really important to do that. Next slide, please. So our role as information disseminators. So local government plays a really important role as an information conduit and for disseminating information from federal and state governments. We pointed the community to those state and federal agencies where they could get bushfire information, help and financial support. So it was a reinforcement of us saying, this is happening, or this is where you can get this help. It's over there, it's with the state, or it's over there, it's with the federal government. This was true in the disaster and the recovery phase. So many agencies had help and advice, and our reach locally was important to get the message out to the community. So local government has great reach in our community. So the state and federal government were coming to us to get the message across there. We were happy to do it, but we were telling the community where to go and who it was from. And also it was reinforcing the levels of government that existed in Australia. This isn't us, this is the state, this is the federal government's role. So next slide, please. So some other really important points that we tried to include in our messaging. Obviously, if we had a lot to tell, we had to be really careful how we told it, especially electronically. So in case you missed it and too long didn't read, there's some really, some other mantras we kept in our heads when we were putting messages together. So according to the Red Cross, an emergency can impact on a person's ability to take in info, think about it, and remember it. So we had to really bear that in mind when we were putting our communications plans together. We were posting the same post repetitively over many weeks and months. So we were posting the same post again and again and again, and they were getting the same response every time we posted them. So the other factor that added to that was that the fires took place over different time periods. So it was important to go back to the initial recovery messaging that we had and start broadcasting that again. So people know about bushfire brain, and I suppose that sort of plays into that. When a bushfire happens, people can't think, or any disaster for that matter, and it becomes a real challenge for people to get the message out there. So what we did was just to repeat everything a lot. Again, you can see on the social media post, we've got our disaster recovery brand as part of that messaging as well on the right hand side. So people knew that when they saw that, it was a recovery message or something to do with that was going to give them help or advice on how to recover from this bushfire. Next slide, please. Another really important thing that we did was promoting hope. So we tried to ensure that we had messages of hope in our communications using psychological first aid developed by the Australian Red Cross, and this was hope, safety, calm, self-worth, and connectedness. The above Facebook post on the right-hand part of the slide really sums up what we were trying to do. It was certainly one of the most popular posts in our bushfire recovery. I think it captured the mood of the community, and the story actually went national and was picked up by the ABC, who used the content. So basically, we had some rare brush-tailed bush wallabies living out in an area where the fire hit. We've been monitoring them over a number of years, and we've been posting videos about them. So the community knew about these wallabies. And a few weeks after the fire ripped through that part of the bush, we sent some staff out there, fearing the worst, that the wallabies wouldn't be there. Their habitat had been wiped out, but they were still there. So they were able to check the cameras that were still intact and look at the footage. We fed them some sweet potatoes, and we just got some fantastic. We posted that on Facebook, and it just filled the community with hope, and it was a really important message. I think one of the nicest messages that we posted. So that was always really important to promote hope. So I've got two more slides. I've got a summing up slide, which is next. Essentially, it's to sum up, is have a strong communications team. Collaborating and supporting each other is really vital. Every community is different. We have a number of communities across the Clarence Valley, and many of them were affected by the bushfires, and they all reacted differently. Some communities were able to adapt very quickly, and others took a lot longer. So you really have to tailor-make your on-the-ground communications really specifically for each community. Be consistent and simple in your messaging, and repeat, repeat, repeat. And that's what I would say to sum up. I've got one more thing that I want to share with you. It's a bit of I suppose, some hope, promoting hope, but also a message to come and see us in the Clarence Valley. It's just a short video to say that we've come back from these bushfires and we're a resilient region. Thank you.
There are loads of people holidaying in our backyard, and why not? It's gorgeous. We love that you connect with our way of living. You'll notice that little things matter a lot around here. So on your next stay with us, please say hello. Rewind, take a break, and try slowing down. The Clarence Valley, my kind of happy.
Thank you so much. I particularly love your commitment to communicating hope. That's a very valuable focus. I have some questions. The first one is, were you explicit in what you didn't know, and what was the reaction of that choice, or the reaction to that choice by other staff, counsellors, agencies, or the community?
Yeah, we were fairly explicit. If we didn't know how, when a bridge would reopen, or when a road would reopen, or when someone would be able to get back to their homes, we said that. I suppose we were managing the council-wide communications, so people in the community were coming to us wanting to know what was happening, maybe not to them, but to their friends or neighbours, but we told them how it was, and people respected that, and I think it helped build trust of us from the community.
Another question, how did the transition from the fire agency public safety information go? What stage did that happen when you became the central communicator?
It's a really difficult question, because the fires lasted so long. It was like a 6-month fire season. We had bushfires starting in one part of the region, and we had recovery messaging in another part of the region, and then the bushfires would go out in one area, and then the recovery 1 messaging would start in one area, and recovery 2 messaging would start in another area. So we had multiple messages happening at the same time. It was challenging. We left the actual fire recovery and the fire information messaging to the state agencies. That was their role, and we focus much more broadly on the recovery information. So New South Wales RFS, we just let them deal with the bushfire information, and we told the community, if you want bushfire community information, bushfire information as it happens, go there. Come back to us when you need to find out how to recover.
A couple of questions about collaboration in the region. How much collaboration was there with surrounding councils around consistency of messaging, particularly as people can be living in one council area, working in another? And a question about collaboration before, during and after events. So.
Okay, so I think in the initial period of recovery, we had weekly telephone conversations with other councils in our region, and we were able to coordinate in some respects. I think initially when it first started, we were really reliant on New South Wales government and sort of waiting for them to give us some information about what we should start putting out. And some councils were much more equipped than other councils to deal with that. As you saw, we've got quite a large communications team, so we were able to really get things out quite quickly. And there were maybe smaller neighbouring councils with much smaller teams, and they would have really struggled, I think, to get as much done as we had in the initial first weeks. I think as the weeks went by, there was much more cooperation and much more organisation as well. I think there'd be a lot of lessons learned for all levels of government on the back of these bushfires.
And one last question. What channels did you find most useful? What tools did you use, given that you didn't have a plan and you were working very quickly to create one? And would that change now that you have a plan in place?
So OEM have got some really great tools. So we're able to access some of their templates, and Red Cross have got some really fantastic templates as well. So I think they were the first ports of call for us when we were putting our plans together. And we just updated them constantly. So we created individual community plans for each of the communities. I mentioned that even communities within local government areas have different needs and different wants. So we were able to create specific plans for those communities. And then we had a general overall communications plan that covered the whole sort of social media, newspapers, radios. I suppose we're gonna, our printed paper is actually finishing at the end of the month. So that's kind of gonna be a challenge for us because we still have an older population that rely on printed media. So we're looking at ways now to get how we're going to get our messaging out to them. I'm hoping on the back of COVID, many older people in our community may have made the leap onto digital communications. I think there would be a certain percentage who would, but there will probably be you know, a significant percentage of people who will be, you know, they'll be lost for a while without their daily paper. I think from my point of view, social media was really effective, and the radio and the print advertising. When we posted anything on our social media channels, we had key influencers in those communities who would then reshare it onto their community pages, or they would go and talk to people in their communities. So that social media reach was really, really important for us.
Thank you.